So what happens if the government says you broke the law? What happens if your neighbor says, hey, you broke the law, pay me? Whether you did it, whether you did not do it, doesn't matter in regards to due process. You have certain rights, whether you are guilty or innocent, no matter what, as a citizen in the United States of America. And if the government or anybody else violates your due process rights, you now have a case to sue them. As an American citizen, you have the right to due process. And due process is the right to fair treatment through the judicial system. That means you are innocent until someone can prove you are guilty. That is how the law works. It doesn't matter if you look guilty. It doesn't matter if you were in the area of the crime. It doesn't matter if you're a super shady person. You deserve fair treatment. No matter who you are or what you look like, you are innocent until proven guilty, and there is a very specific process to determine whether or not you should be accused of a crime and whether or not you committed a crime. Everybody has these rights to due process. The reason why you have that, the reason why the Constitution guarantees due process and that everybody is innocent until proven guilty, is to prevent the government from unfairly depriving people of their natural rights. Because if it's the opposite, if it's all, nah, we know he did it, he totally did, look, he had a knife and he looks kind of shady and you could just tell he's a criminal, well then we'd have a lot of people that don't look pretty going to jail who didn't commit a crime. We will have a government putting people in jail that are innocent if we just say, nah, we're guilty until you can figure out how to prove otherwise. That's not going to lead to a very safe government. That's going to lead to a government that is tyranny. And so due process is the special protection that we have against possible government abuse to prevent innocent people from being punished. Now, there are two types of due process. The first type is substantive due process. Substantive due process is the type of due process that determines whether or not there is sufficient justification for depriving, taking away life, liberty, or property. This requires that the law must be followed and be done in a fair way for all citizens. Remember that 14th Amendment? Well, due process comes from the 14th Amendment. All people must be treated the same by the law. So you can't have one way of interpreting the law for one type of person and do it differently for another type. Everyone has to be treated fairly and the same when it comes to trying to decide, are we going to put you in jail or not? Are we going to force you to do community service or pay fine? Now, some of you might be thinking, whoa, wait a minute. You said property, but then you also told me way back when that the founding fathers didn't want to protect the right to property. And that's true, but they did want to make sure you had protection for whatever property you do have. So the Fourth Amendment, number 4, protects citizens' right to have your possessions and your bodies protected from unreasonable searches and seizures by the government. That doesn't mean the government can't search you, search your property, search your possessions, or even take your possessions. It can, but it has to be a reasonable search. And there's a term for that. That term is probable cause. In order for the police or a federal agent to search or seize anything that belongs to you, including your own body, they have to have probable cause. Judges require police to prove they have a good reason. That's what probable cause is. A good reason to believe that someone may be committing a crime. Otherwise, no search warrant will be issued. A police officer or federal agent needs a search warrant given to them by a judge. They can't just write it themselves. By a judge who agrees, yes, you do have a good reason to suspect that there is a crime happening, go ahead and search their house, search their car, whatever's written into the warrant, as long as the police officers have probable cause. However, just like with other rights and liberties, there are times when the government can search and or seize, take away, without a warrant. For example, drug testing in jobs that affect the safety of the public. Now, normally, the government can't come up to you and say, drug test right now, just because. It can't do that. It can't force you to drug test unless you are in a position where if you're on drugs, it could hurt others. So, for example, if you're in the military, all right, if you are on drugs and you are high on the battlefield, others might die because of you. So if the government wants to say right here, right now, drug test and give me the results, it can do that, and it doesn't need a warrant because that is a job that impacts the safety of the public. Same thing if you're an air traffic controller or a pilot, the government can require you to be drug tested without a search warrant. And that is a violation of your privacy, but it requires that anyways because you might hurt others. And that's the common theme here. Your rights will always be limited if your right hurts someone else. That you never ever have the right to do. Now, the other type of due process is procedural due process. Procedural due process is the type of due process where certain procedures must be followed to carry out and enforce the law, especially in regards to trial procedures. So substantive is more about should we even have a trial based on evidence, probable cause. Procedural is once the trial has begun, what rights do you still have? Because again, until that trial is done, you're still innocent. Even if you did it, until the government proves that you did it, you're innocent, you still have rights. So procedural due process is your right to a lawyer, your right to a jury of your peers deciding if you're guilty. Citizens will decide if you're guilty, not the government. Because if it was up to the government, they would just say, yeah, you're guilty. There's no way our police officers got that wrong. He's totally guilty. Yeah. Because it would be embarrassing to them if they arrested you and then you were innocent. So that's why you get judged by citizens, not the government. Those are the kind of rights that are procedural. If you can't afford a lawyer, because lawyers are very expensive, then the government has to give you a public defender, because the Constitution requires that you have an attorney if you want one, and if you can't afford it, you're going to have one anyways. Totally free of charge. It's not on loan. You don't have to pay it back later because if you don't understand the law as good as a lawyer does, it'll be a lot easier to convict you of a crime that you didn't do if you don't understand all the laws and procedures that has to do with defending yourself in a proper way that doesn't make you look ridiculous or shady or evil or all those things that might lead to a wrong conviction. So you have a right to a public defender if you can't afford your own private lawyer. And that's all the time we have right now for due process. If you have any questions, please let me know in class.